With us now is Joe Kaufman. Joe, it's a pleasure to have you with us on the Shalom Show. You are the president of Americans Against Hate. Please tell our audience, our viewers, what your organization represents.
Well, we started out as an anti-bigotry group in August of 1998, and we dealt with a lot of different issues regarding that subject. But after 9/11, the focus of our organization dramatically changed to the point where we almost entirely focused on the subject of terrorism.
Joe, your organization has been subjected to quite a bit of criticism. You're called a right-wing extremist, and I'd like you to explain why people feel that way about your organization.
Well, usually that comes from the enemy. That comes from organizations such as al-quaeda, Hamas front in the United States. Usually they label our group, and myself included, as a racist or an Islamophobe, but that couldn't be anything further from the truth. Indeed, the focus of our organization is not to go after individuals such as Muslims or such, but to go after those connected to terrorism. The focus of our organization is to shut down those American organizations that are connected to terrorism overseas.
Recently, there was a case of a professor in a South Florida university accused of being a supporter of a terrorist organization, and there are so many similar instances of such situations. Tell us a little bit about how they get away with it.
Well, you know, the FBI, what the feds usually do is they will compile information, and until something is imminent or there's an imminent threat, then they won't go after those individuals, such as the case of like Samuel Arian from Tampa. He had created an entire Palestinian Islamic Jihad infrastructure in the Temple Terrace area of Tampa, and the FBI was watching this individual for 9 years until this individual went on the Bill O'Reilly show on Fox News, and O'Reilly had said to him that if he were the FBI or if he were the U.S. government, he would be tailing this individual 24/7. And that is when the FBI took action against him and actually arrested him, and he's been in trouble with the law ever since. So unfortunately, it takes going public with information many times in order to have something happen, you know, to have justice served.
That seems quite astonishing. Give us some more instances of that occurring.
You know, I could tell you one thing where it went right, but again, it's this imminence. Here in South Florida, we have two imams that were found to be financing the Taliban to the tune of over $50,000 US. And one was an imam of this Flagler Mosque in Miami, and another was an imam of this Margate Mosque in Broward County. And these both of these individuals were involved together, and the FBI came in and they arrested the two, and now they're awaiting their trial. But the case was that it was some kind of imminent threat. One of the imams had stated that this money was to go towards specifically towards weapons and explosives, and that would mean to target U.S. troops overseas. But if these individuals were involved in activity over a period of time, such as Al-Arian, I think that they would probably tend to wait on the situation.
Joe, what are your organization's goals?
Our organization's goal is specifically to shut down American groups that are connected to terrorism overseas. Groups like CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, which was created by operatives from the terrorist organization Hamas, or groups like the Islamic Society of North America, the Islamic Circle of North America, groups that are connected to the Muslim Brotherhood overseas. This is a big focus of our organization. As well, we would like to see groups like the Muslim Brotherhood placed on the U.S. terrorism list. It's not right that one of the largest terrorist organizations in the world their name is not found on that terror list. It's very important that that happens. In order to go after many of these organizations, that needs to happen.
Speaking of Israel, do you feel that peace can be achieved there if Israel makes further concessions, giving up more land for peace. Tiny little Israel in a vast mass of Arab countries. Do you believe that would work?
No, I don't. For the simple fact that as Israel gets smaller and smaller, Israel is threatened even more, such as the case with Ariel Sharon giving up Gaza. What happened when all of these Jews were thrown out of their homes for Hamas to take over Gaza? Well, instead of Hamas firing rockets into Gaza, now Hamas is firing rockets into Israel proper, into Sderot and other communities. So as Israel gets smaller, the terrorist organizations get closer and closer to the heart of Israel, Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, and so I don't believe peace can be achieved with that, especially for the fact that that a group like Fatah is now partnering with Hamas. Both Fatah and Hamas have charters calling for Israel's destruction. Hezbollah has essentially taken over Lebanon. Egypt today is, it looks like the Muslim Brotherhood is in control of Egypt, sitting on billions of dollars of U.S.-made weapons, including F-16 fighter jets. You have a possibly nuclear Iran. Today, the stakes are a lot greater than they were, say, in 1967 during the Six-Day War. Back then, these neighbors of Israel, the enemy neighbors, were fighting with guns and knives. Today, you have possibly nuclear weapons, possibly these fighter jets from an enemy, now an enemy country. So the stakes are a lot higher today. Israel can't afford to give up anything that she has. If anything, they should maybe look to gain, but certainly never to give up.
Joe, before we continue, I must apologize to our viewers that there are some noises in the background. We are taping this interview on location here in East Broward. Joe, thinking of giving up land for peace, before 1967, there was no peace with Israel's neighbors, and today individuals are saying that if Israel would give up more land for peace, that perhaps the Arabs and the Muslims in general would accept what they refused to accept before 1967. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, it's great to debate that subject, but what happens if you don't have peace doing that? What happens if you go back to these 67 borders? You put yourself in a worse situation than you were before. What happens if these countries, possibly led by the Muslim Brotherhood today, you know, we recently lost a peace partner in Hosni Mubarak, and now it looks like the Muslim Brotherhood has taken over for that student-led revolution. So what happens if those organizations don't want peace? What if it's just all talk? And what if what they really want is to reform this caliphate that they had in the that England and others took away from them in the 1920s, and also want to get rid of Israel, to destroy Israel, as the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas and Hezbollah as well would love nothing more than to do that. So, you know, it's great to debate these subjects, but when it comes down to it, when it comes to the lives of Israel civilians, when it comes to Israel itself and the strengthening of Israel and the protection of Israel, I would say that you can't. In the end, you can't debate over the subject. When the threat's out there, you have to just put your foot down and say, we're not going to do it. There's a threat hanging over us, and we're not going to do it. And unless you know that that threat is absolutely off the table, then you can't do anything.
I'd like to wish you the very best, and all of us the very best. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
I'll be right back. This concludes our special show for today from On Location in South Florida. I'm Richard Peretz. Thank you for being with us.
We are seeing an increasing hostile and evil force, both in Europe and clearly in the Middle East, and now America.
These are frozen waffles.
Yes.
And I don't think I've ever had a frozen waffle. Have you ever had one?
I have.
Are they tasty?
Sure they are.
Butter and syrup?
You can put syrup on them. Yeah, a little powdered sugar sometimes.
Powdered sugar?
Yeah. Yeah, they're nice. What's that?
I don't know. It's a thing.
Oh, my goodness, it's a slingshot. Oh, my. Well.
Wow. Where'd that go?
Just right in front of the desk,
yeah. Okay. Be careful. I don't want to hurt anybody.
Well.
You see that thing? It went with the speed of light and traveled about 1.5 feet. Try for up there. They used something very similar to this in the Civil War. Were you aware of that? Oh! All right. Okay.
Right up there.
Caught the woman off guard up there. I think I might have fractured her cheekbone.
Well, look at the frozen. Are they frozen?
I'm begging you, no lawsuits.
Yeah.
All right, we'll try one more,
frozen.
and then we'll put it away. Try one.
I certainly hope so.
All right. I'm going to try one more.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you. So, we know we have that.
At the very least.
If nothing else happens tonight, we go back to the waffle.
I understand.
Because that seemed to be a huge hit.
Yeah. Hey.
Well, I know where I am. The problem is that people don't like it. And clearly, I love that your show is named Peace. It's what I'm fighting for. But with many people, peace cannot be negotiated because this is not their objective.
Itself from hostile invasions and terror. Israel is a small state surrounded by Arab countries 650 times its size, some of which are large bases of global terror. Only 44 miles separate between the Jordan Valley and the Mediterranean Sea. After the Six-Day War in 1967, when Israel was attacked by 4 armies on 3 fronts, United Nations Security Council Resolution 242 stated that Israel was entitled to new defensible borders to replace the previous fragile lines from which it was attacked. What are Israel's defensible borders? What are its essential security needs? The Jordan Rift Valley, Israel's eastern frontier, forms a natural barrier between Israel and the countries of Jordan, Iraq, and Iran. The Jordan Valley rises from an area that is 1,200 feet below sea level to a hilly ridge of up to 3,000 feet, creating a steep 4,200-foot virtual wall opposite any force attacking from the east. The growing threat of global jihad activity near Israel's borders requires it to prevent infiltrations of terrorists and weapons. When Israel left the Philadelphia corridor in Gaza, it became a highway for the infiltration of terrorists and the flow of hundreds of tons of ammunition and weaponry from all over the Arab world, aimed at Israeli civilians. The Jordan Valley is the equivalent of Gaza's Philadelphia corridor in the West Bank. To defend itself, Israel must retain control over the Jordan Valley. This is Israel's mountain ridge, rising up to 3,000 feet. It dominates Israel's major coastal cities, where more than 70% of its population, 80% of its industry, and all of its airfields and seaports are located. Missiles launched from the Judean hills pose an immediate threat to Jerusalem, Israel's capital. Israel's only international airport, Ben Gurion, would be in the range of even primitive rockets. while all planes taking off and landing would be threatened by shoulder-launched anti-aircraft missiles. More advanced weaponry would be able to hit virtually any point in Israel. If Israel were forced back to the 1949 armistice lines, the Green Line, the country's width would be reduced to a narrow 9-mile waistline that would be impossible to defend. That's why any future arrangement must include Israeli control over key areas of the mountain ridge and a demilitarized Palestinian state. Israel's narrow borders means a combat aircraft can cross the entire country in under 4 minutes. In less than 2 minutes, an enemy plane could penetrate the country's airspace via the Jordan Valley and reach Jerusalem. In order to thwart an aerial attack on Jerusalem, a hostile plane must be shot down at least 10 miles east of the capital to prevent it from crashing into major population centers. Therefore, Israel must be able to identify hostile planes before they cross the Jordan River line and intercept them shortly after. To defend itself, Israel must control the airspace over the West Bank. Israel's transportation arteries, and in particular the Trans-Israel Highway, enable travel and connection between Israel's regions. They also assure the mobility of the Israel Defense Forces in case of attack. Protection of these vital arteries is essential in order to ensure that 1. Civilians aren't victims of terrorist gunfire. 2. Regions of the country cannot easily be cut off. 3. The mobility of Israel's defense forces is not hindered in the case of invasion. To defend itself, Israel must control its main arteries of transportation. There is enormous uncertainty about future trends in the Middle East. Iran is determined to become the supreme power as the U.S. withdraws from Iraq. No one can guarantee the future of many of the current regimes in the region. Today, more than ever, it is crucial to ensure defensible borders for Israel.
We are seeing an increasing hostile and evil force, both in Europe and clearly in the Middle East, and now America. Well, I know where I am. The problem is that people don't like it. And clearly, I love that your show is named Peace. It's what I'm fighting for. But with many people, peace cannot be negotiated because this is not their objective.